XRP holders. Something feels very different right now. And honestly, a growing number of investors are starting to believe Wall Street may already be quietly preparing for something much bigger behind the scenes. Because suddenly, the entire financial conversation around crypto is changing fast. Banks are moving differently. Institutional discussions are getting more serious. Tokenization conversations are exploding. ETF narratives are accelerating. And XRP communities everywhere are asking the exact same question. Why does it suddenly feel like Wall Street knows something the public still doesn't fully understand yet? Because historically, major financial shifts rarely happen loudly in the beginning. At first, most ordinary investors ignore the signs completely. Then slowly, institutions start repositioning. Governments begin building frameworks. Liquidity systems evolve. Financial infrastructure modernizes. And eventually, the broader public suddenly realizes the world changed much faster than expected. That's exactly why XRP holders are becoming so emotional right now. Because many supporters believe Ripple spent years preparing for a future the financial system itself is only now beginning to move toward. Now, before we go any further, let's make something extremely important clear immediately. Because social media exaggerates crypto headlines faster than almost anything online. There's no official confirmation proving Wall Street secretly adopted XRP overnight. There's no guaranteed evidence XRP suddenly replaces the global banking system tomorrow. And this video is definitely not financial advice. But what we are going to discuss is why institutional finance conversations are accelerating rapidly, why banks and governments are modernizing digital infrastructure, and why XRP supporters believe Ripple may already be positioned around one of the biggest financial transformations in modern history. Because honestly, once you really begin understanding how global finance itself is evolving, the excitement surrounding XRP suddenly starts making much more sense. Now think carefully about what's happening globally right now, all at the same time. Artificial intelligence is transforming industries overnight. Governments are building digital finance frameworks aggressively. Banks are modernizing settlement infrastructure globally. Asset managers are exploring tokenization at massive scale. And institutions everywhere are preparing for increasingly digital financial ecosystems. That transformation is real. And the craziest part? Most ordinary people still don't fully realize how enormous this transition could eventually become. Now think carefully about how Wall Street institutions usually operate. Large financial firms rarely move emotionally. They rarely announce long-term positioning immediately. And historically, major financial transformations often begin quietly before broader markets fully understand what's happening. Institutions study infrastructure first. They analyze regulations first. They evaluate liquidity systems first. They monitor operational efficiency first. That's critical to understand. Because institutional finance operates on completely different time horizons compared to emotional retail speculation. Now, let's talk about Ripple specifically, because honestly, this is where things become especially interesting. Ripple spent years focusing on institutional infrastructure instead of retail hype cycles. Cross-border settlement, liquidity movement, financial interoperability, payment modernization. Those are trillion-dollar institutional conversations. And now suddenly, the financial world itself appears to be moving directly toward the exact areas Ripple spent years preparing for. That's why supporters believe Wall Street may already be paying much closer attention to XRP than most people currently realize. Now think carefully about this. For years, most crypto conversations revolved around meme coins, retail speculation, short-term hype, social media pumps. But now, the conversation is evolving rapidly. Institutions are discussing tokenization. Governments are building digital asset regulations. Banks are integrating blockchain research aggressively. And financial infrastructure globally is modernizing much faster than average people expected. That's enormous. Because once institutions stop asking, does blockchain matter? And start asking, how do we safely integrate blockchain into financial systems? The entire industry enters a completely different phase of evolution. That's exactly where many XRP supporters believe the market may be heading now. Now, let's talk about liquidity because honestly, this is one of the most important parts of the entire conversation. Every single day, trillions of dollars move globally. Corporate settlements, international trade, government transactions, foreign exchange operations, cross-border liquidity systems. The scale is almost impossible for ordinary people to fully comprehend. And yet, despite modern technological advancements, much of the infrastructure handling these movements still contains major inefficiencies, settlement delays, operational friction, liquidity fragmentation, cross-border payment inefficiencies. That's exactly why institutions worldwide started aggressively researching blockchain infrastructure more seriously. Because in finance, efficiency matters enormously. Saving seconds at institutional scale can save billions. Improving liquidity movement improves operational efficiency. Reducing friction improves competitiveness globally. And XRP supporters believe Ripple positioned itself directly around those exact institutional conversations years before mainstream finance publicly acknowledged where the world might eventually head. Now here's why investors suddenly feel like Wall Street may be quietly preparing for something massive. Because institutional behavior itself appears to be changing. Major firms are exploring tokenization aggressively. Banks are researching digital settlement systems. Governments are accelerating crypto regulation frameworks. Asset managers are discussing blockchain integration more openly. And financial infrastructure conversations suddenly became mainstream. That shift matters enormously. Because historically, when institutions begin focusing heavily on infrastructure, major market transitions often follow later. Now again, balance matters because social media exaggerates absolutely everything instantly. There's no guarantee XRP automatically dominates future financial systems. Competition remains intense. Stablecoins continue expanding aggressively. Governments may prioritize centralized digital currencies instead. Banks could develop entirely private blockchain infrastructure. And nobody knows exactly how adoption unfolds long-term. But what feels increasingly undeniable now is this. The financial world itself is transforming rapidly. Digital infrastructure is expanding globally. Institutional blockchain adoption is accelerating. Tokenization conversations are exploding worldwide. And XRP continues remaining directly connected to discussions surrounding liquidity movement, settlement modernization, and cross-border interoperability. Now, let's talk about tokenization because, honestly, this topic may completely reshape global finance over the next decade. Most average people still don't fully understand how enormous tokenization could eventually become. Imagine stocks settling digitally instantly, real estate becoming globally tradable, government bonds moving through blockchain systems, assets trading worldwide 24/7. Programmable financial ecosystems operating automatically across borders. That future sounds futuristic today, but major institutions are actively preparing for it right now. Banks are modernizing infrastructure aggressively. Governments are building digital finance frameworks. Asset managers are investing billions into tokenized ecosystems. And financial systems globally are evolving much faster than average people realize. Now think carefully about what happens if enormous amounts of tokenized value eventually move through digital ecosystems globally. Liquidity becomes critical. Settlement efficiency becomes essential. Interoperability between systems becomes incredibly valuable. That's exactly why XRP supporters believe Ripple's infrastructure could eventually become highly important long-term, because Ripple focused specifically on moving liquidity efficiently between systems. Now, let's talk emotionally for a second because, honestly, this is where the XRP story becomes incredibly powerful psychologically. A lot of people today feel financially exhausted. Inflation reduced purchasing power. Debt levels exploded globally. Housing became harder to afford. Traditional savings feel weaker every year. And meanwhile, giant institutions always seem to position themselves early before ordinary investors fully understand what's happening. That frustration creates enormous emotional energy around disruptive technologies connected to the future. Because people desperately want to believe they still have a chance to participate early in the next major financial transformation before institutions fully dominate it. And that emotional reality is exactly why so many XRP holders suddenly feel like Wall Street may already be quietly preparing for something absolutely massive behind the scenes right now.